Welcome to the latest episode of the Best of Cool Culture Corner, where we go back and look at some of the past episodes of Cool Culture Corner, the podcast, and we apply them to today in the days of COVID and hopefully soon post-pandemic and unrest and cancel culture and all the things that we're dealing with now that we didn't necessarily have to deal with back then. Hi, I'm Ken Bator, your host for both the Best of Cool Culture Corner and the podcast Cool Culture Corner. The episode we're going to look back at today is almost to the very day 4 years ago when I recorded Execution is a People Problem. Now, I'll play the original, or at least a portion of the original podcast. It was only about 5 minutes or so, bear with me on that one. I won't toss another 20 minutes on here. These are meant to be short, but this is really interesting to go back to. But before I get into that, I just want to acknowledge that this is the first episode of the Best of Cool Culture Corner since just before Thanksgiving 2020. Did have to deal with some COVID issues myself, and I want to dedicate this particular episode to my father-in-law who did lose his life to COVID. He was a great man, served our country in the Navy, and wanted to acknowledge him and just say that I'm sorry that I had a hiatus for a while, but from COVID and losing a very close family member, we needed to take a little bit of a break on this one. So my apologies, and in my prayers and my heart goes out to everybody that has either had COVID or has lost a family member to this terrible virus. I certainly know what that's like. But let's get back to execution is a people problem. And this really applies today. And this allows me to do some cross promotion because Branding the Experience is also relaunched recently with a new segment that I bring in every once in a while called Am I the Jagoff? Because sometimes I put out advice or thoughts on experiences, and sometimes I'm wrong. So I bring on experts to tell me whether I'm spot on or if I'm the one that's off, if you will. And this last one that I just recorded that will be going live on March 15th on Branding the Experience, we talked about 4 different restaurant experiences that we had. 3 of them were really, really bad. Or at least I shouldn't say maybe really bad, but definitely under the level of acceptable by my standards. And my experts determined that a lot of the problems were due to management. And as I talked about 4 years ago in Execution is a People Problem, sometimes the process is still valuable, but we just simply do not have the team buy-in to execute it at the level that's needed. Let's listen back to Execution is a People Problem.
Our subject today, execution is a people problem. And I actually read that line in a Harvard Business Review article just a few days ago, which was spot on. In fact, what they said is execution is a people problem, not a strategy problem. The strategy is just a process on paper. But in order to execute and implement, we need people to be on board. And it actually reminded me as I was reading that article of 2 situations I have going on right now with 2 completely different clients in 2 completely different industries and even 2 completely different time zones, where our strategy is not producing the results that we would like. Now, interestingly enough, the client that I have that's about 2,000 miles away, and the strategy is not producing the results that we want. Yeah, I talked to him and I said, I almost apologetically in that, I'm feeling that we're not giving you the value that you signed up for. And it was so refreshing when the client said, I absolutely disagree with you. And his point was, maybe the strategy was sound at one point, and we need to change the process. But he said that the people that we have on it, including myself, are all sound and are all implementing what we have on paper in order to try and drive results. Now, the fact that the results have not been achieved is less to do with the effort and more to do with the strategy, because the people are in place to get the right strategy actually accomplished. And so what we're doing is looking for ways to completely revamp the process and the strategy so that we can continue our high level of execution, but do so with a strategy that may make more sense now with our knowledge of what doesn't work. Now, another client that I have, we actually have, in my opinion, a process and a strategy that is much more sound and founded than the one with my client about 2,000 miles away. I think we're doing a lot of the things that are necessary in order to drive a result. Now, those results haven't come to what we want them to be yet, although we are getting very small level results. And it's difficult when you have a client that is impatient, that wants to actually change the execution of a strategy that's just barely starting to work before it actually bears some fruit. When we plant seeds in the garden and look the next day and expect a whole line of vegetables to already be popped out, that's just an unrealistic expectation. But unlike the CEO of the other business, this individual is very hard driving. He's beginning to blame certain people for the strategy not working, and what that's doing is taking a sound strategy, and instead of people continuing to execute it at a high level, because again, much like my other client, we do have the right team in place. What it's doing is it's questioning people on the team, or I should say the team members are questioning whether they even want to be part of the team, even though they see things that are working and saying, I don't know if I necessarily want to deal with this management style. So this is an example of people actually creating a problem with the strategy execution. And that maybe things need to be tweaked a little bit, maybe things need to be added to. But once you start looking at blaming somebody rather than something when the process is sound, that's when you don't have a cool culture corner. You have anything but a cool culture corner. You still have a culture, but and you're still in the corner, that's for sure. But it's anything but cool. And what that's creating is a focus that is now on, all right, we're not communicating properly, and we're not even liking working with each other, which is a much bigger problem than just simply tweaking a strategy and finding a way to make it work, maybe finding a way to accelerate the process in order to get the results that we're looking for a little bit quicker, rather than actually denigrating the team culture that we had and creating a whole different set of problems.
So let's apply this to today. And I think that if we take just one specific point from execution is a people problem, not a strategy problem. It definitely is a culture problem that leads to a branding problem many times, a branding the experience problem. But if we take one thing, it's that many times as we're getting back to work, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's a bank, and I know banks haven't shut down, but there were people that were furloughed, there were people that were let go, and there's some people that are coming back now. And we have spas that are reopening and a lot of other things like that, that we need to understand that the process that we had before, especially when it worked, when we followed it, that we need to retrain, we need to reintroduce that. Yeah, especially if we have some new people. It's many times it's not the process that's the problem. The problem is teaching and training and mentoring the people to execute that process, to execute that strategy. So as we're getting back to something that looks like normal, I know this is March 2021. And things aren't quite back to normal yet. Some things are a little bit normalized, but the idea of providing a great experience to your customer, to your member if you're a credit union, to your client is still needed. Yeah, I know that there's a little bit of empathy for some businesses through consumers coming back and they're saying, well, they're getting their stuff together again. And I do have a little bit of that empathy, but we still have basic principles and standards of service that need to be adhered to. And we also need to understand that our employees have been through a lot. Some of them may have had COVID. Some of them may have lost a family member to COVID. And we need to retrain, re-engage, and most importantly, as I talk about in Cool Culture Corner, involve them, re-involve them in the process of growing again, in the process of rebuilding the business that we had. So execution is not a strategy problem. It is definitely a people problem and definitely a culture problem. Thanks for spending a little bit of time with me today, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks with another episode of the Best of Cool Culture Corner. Good to be back. Take care of yourself. Stay safe.
Now a word from our sponsor, Bator Training and Consulting. BTC is the creator of the B plus C plus S formula. Our clients that implement that formula increase their net income by 124% and grow their business by 17% on average. The best place to start working with Bator Training and Consulting is with our B plus C plus S audit. The service pinpoints issues as well as attributes of your business's unique brand, culture, and strategy. Learn more or sign up for a B plus C plus S audit at www.btcinc.net/BCS-audit.